Lethality Jinx has made its way into meta, and it's now the most optimal way to play her. What do you guys think of lethality builds on ADCs? Are they healthy for the game, or are you hoping that Riot nerfs it next patch? Let us know in the comments below. And are you sick of losing games from bad teammates? Well, at SkillCapped, we turn your frustrating losses into satisfying wins. Take our brand new Season 14 courses that teach you the secrets to winning as top laner, jungler, mid laner, AD carry, and support. Then pair that with our other new courses on how to counter OP top and mid laners, master your jungle clears, or check out our new Bronze to Diamond series. We even have new Season 14 courses on macro, wave control, trading, settings and hotkeys, CSing, vision, mechanics, low elo mistakes, and the list goes on. Then head over to our Smurf commentaries. Simply select the champion you want to master and get guides from challenger experts teaching how to play your champion in the exact rank you're stuck in. You're even guaranteed to have all your questions answered by that very same challenger expert. Our service really does work. That's why we offer a rank up guarantee. If you don't rank up while actively using SkillCapped, you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below right now to get the rank you've always dreamed of. So starting things off up in the top lane, one change we'll be making to the tier list for mid patch is adding Ryze back for top. Ryze top lane had been pretty non-existent in recent patches, but now with the buffs from 14.17, he's starting to see some more play again and is actually performing pretty well. By running Phase Rush, Ryze top fares very well against melee characters who lack mobility like Nasus, Darius, Garen, and so on. As long as you're playing around that Phase Rush cooldown and not overexerting yourself when it's down, you should never really lose a trade with Ryze in those matchups. It's the higher mobility tops who can gap close multiple times onto you like Aurelia and Riven, who can be more volatile to lane against, so avoiding them is a good idea. So overall, if you picked in the right spots, Ryze top definitely has a place in meta, and you'll find him in the A tier. Not a whole lot else to report for top lane as we reach the midway point of the patch, as the OP tier remains the same with Aatrox and Set. We do have a few minor adjustments for Kennen and Mundo, as both champs have ended up getting hurt a little more than anticipated from this patch, so we're bumping them down an extra tier. Mundo was not directly nerfed, but the nerfs to Warmogs have ended up putting a pretty good dent into his solo queue viability. One thing to note for Urgot is that the nerfs to Fleet this patch have seemed to tip the scales back towards press the attack being his #1 keystone. There was a long run there where Fleet outperformed PTA on Urgot, but that has now come to an end. Very much like top lane, jungle was another role minimally impacted by 14.17, as a lot of the changes were more placebo than anything else. Lilia nerfs have brought her down in power slightly, but as we expected, not enough to significantly remove her from meta, so she remains in the S tier. The buffs to Graves and Kindred have been pretty underwhelming like we had anticipated, so both champs continue to be rated as B tier picks. Now, the one change we are making to the jungle tier list for mid patch is promoting Udyr up into OP tier. Udyr has been on the verge of OP for a while now, and with his play rate continuing to rise for solo queue, along with Lilia dropping down for this patch, we're more confident in bumping Udyr up now. Very much like Amumu, Udyr loves the Liandry's rush as it gives him a really nice one-item spike, and he can begin taking over games from then on out. Udyr moving up into OP means that someone had to drop down, and with Shyvana getting hit with the nerfs to Fleet for this patch, she's the odd one out. Nerfs weren't just a slight nudge either, as Shyvana has actually lost a significant amount of strength due to the changes, so we're going to be moving her into the jungle A tier. The biggest winner coming out of 14.17 has been from the mid lane, and it's Lissandra. List buffs were definitely the ones we underestimated the most for this patch, as she's now looking like one of the premier solo Q picks. Q buff is actually really big because it's the spell you max out first and is also on a very short cooldown at max rank, so 20 added damage goes a long way throughout an extended skirmish. R buff helps as well, but it's really the Q change where we think she's gained the most amount of strength from. Especially with the way the mid lane meta is aligned right now, there's definitely a spot for Lissandra to thrive. Yasuo, LeBlanc, Yone, and Katarina are all matchups that Lissandra has above a 53% win rate against, and all of them are being picked a ton in meta, so Lissandra is getting a big promotion for mid patch as we're bumping her all the way up into the OP tier. Mid lane has definitely been the role with the most amount of wacky stuff popping up as of late, with both Garen and Nasus seeing play in the pro scene. Garen mid is actually quite good for solo queue as well though, and has honestly always been a pick that has had great viability for mid. It's just that nobody really played him. It's kind of similar to something like the Tryndamere mid that we've been seeing a little bit in the past. It's always pretty good, but due to its more off-meta nature, it never really gets too much attention. Well, we finally got that attention now for Garen mid, with it being played in the LCK, and as a result, its play rate has doubled in solo queue. If you really want to play a mid lane champ who is super easy and just absolutely stomps other melee mids, then Garen is the no-brainer pickup. Garen obliterates matchups like Yasuo, Katarina, Yone, Fizz, and Sylas, who are picks that many traditional mid lane champs can run into more difficulties against. It's the same setup that you would run with top lane Garen, being Stridebreaker as the rush and Phantom Dancer second. Even though Phase Rush tends to perform better for top lane Garen, mid lane is winning more with Conqueror right now. So as for Garen's tier list placement, you will be able to find him in the S tier as one one of the better solo queue mids. Now, as for the Nasus mid pick, this is definitely one that is a little bit more pro skewed than Garen. Garen is great for solo queue because he has a stronger early game, but then also scales quite nicely into the mid game. Early game with Nasus can be a lot more difficult to maneuver, and you just don't have the same kind of agency that Garen does. With that being said, if you can pick Nasus mid in the correct spots, he does offer a mass amount of value. If the enemy comp has 2 or more auto attack reliant champions, locking in Nasus can be great value. This is why we're seeing it pop up in pro play as of late, because ADCs are being picked a bunch in both the top and mid lane. With Nasus W, it not only provides a movement speed slow, but an attack speed slow as well, so if you're tossing that on the enemy's carries and fights, their impact will be non-existent. Since for solo queue we don't see as many ADCs played top and mid, Nasus is not as valuable of a pick, but he's definitely not terrible either, so we're placing him 1 tier below Garen in A. So for the mid lane tier list, we've got Vex, Naafiri, and Lissandra as the most OP champs for 14.17. Other than Garen and Nasus being added to the tier list and Lissandra moving up, we're also dropping LeBlanc down 1 tier for mid patch. Nerf has hit slightly harder than we expected, so she's dropping out of S and into A. Sylas's nerf, on the other hand, has played out more to expectations, as he has not lost very much strength at all and remains in the S tier. We noted in the pre-patch tier list that we may have to drop Katarina down for mid patch, and will be going ahead with that. We were hoping that Kat would still remain in a solid spot even after the nerf, but she's now back to being a pretty average B tier pick. So the only thing that has really changed for Katarina over the past few patches is that she's now better suited building AP than AD, while her relative power has remained the same. So we have a brand new way to play Jinx for 14.17, as lethality has made its way into meta. The build in question has you rushing the Collector, grabbing Opportunity second, and then Mortal Reminder third. Build offers up a lot more upfront burst power, which is often a lot more valuable than consistent DPS for solo queue, as capitalizing on catch plays is really important, especially if you're paired up with a melee engaged support who will be looking for picks all game. This is where the build can really thrive. Now, if you're paired up with an enchanter though, going for a standard crit build that will scale better into the late game is still 100% viable. With lethality, our damage is going to hurt super hard, so if your melee support can chunk a squishy for a decent amount of damage and you just follow with W and R, the execute potential is really strong. You also want to make sure that you're taking press the attack for the Keystone Rune instead of fleet for more upfront burst power. The secondary page that you run with this build is quite unique, as it's cashback and jack of all trades from the inspiration tree. You really want to be hitting your item spikes as quick as possible when building lethality, since the build does fall off the later games go, which is why cashback has a lot of value here. Varus is another ADC who's had a meta shift with builds for this patch, as lethality is now back to being an optimal choice. It's the opportunity rush that is leading to the most amount of success for Varus in 14.17, followed up by Mana Immune, of course. As for the Keystone Rune, you will want to be taking Comet instead of PTA or Hail of Blades, so that your poke from range will hit even harder. Even after the buffs though, Varus is still underperforming compared to many other ADCs in solo queue. However, he's in a slightly better spot than we had predicted for the pre-patch tier list, so we're going to be bumping him out of C and into B. So here's what the ADC tier list will be looking like for mid-patch as we continue to rate Misfortune and Jhin as the optimal solo queue carries. One minor adjustment we're making for mid-patch is moving Caitlyn back down in the ADC B tier. We thought that the direct buffs would be enough to propel her up into A for this patch, but it turns out the nerfs to Fleet have resulted in Kate's power remaining pretty neutral, as her win rate has barely moved up for 14.17. With this new Jinx build popping up and performing very well in her, we're going to be giving the champ a push back up into S tier. So the meta for ADC right now is pretty interesting, because there are 2 clear-cut winners, being Misfortune and Jhin, and there are also a ton of super weak champs down in the C tier. Nerfs to Ezreal for this patch have pushed him down to being one of the weakest ADCs for solo queue, as he sits alongside Aphelios, Kalista, and Tristana as 4 champs you are better off staying away from if your main goal is to climb with the least amount of resistance. So moving on to the support role now, we were pretty spot on with our pre-patch adjustments to the tier list, so there's not much new to report for mid-patch. OP tier looks the same, as we've got Poppy and Senna. Senna is still great despite the nerfs, and the enchanter builds have remained viable for her, but definitely don't be sleeping on Black Cleaver either. Very few players are running Black Cleaver on Senna, but it is the build performing best on her now after the AP ratio nerfs she received this patch. In games where the enemy comp has a lot of heavy dive, value from Black Cleaver is great, as the added durability will help you survive longer. Against a very tanky comp, Black Cleaver is great too, due to the armor shred that you'll provide. Pyke losing base armor for this patch has surprisingly not seemed to have had an impact on his power at all, at least analytically. One reason for this could be due to the fact that so many melee supports were indirectly nerfed by the Warmogs and Celestial changes, so that helped to lessen the effect of the armor nerf to Pyke. You'd think he'd lose at least a little win rate though, but it's not budged at all from where it was in 14.16, so we'll be pushing Pyke back up into the support S tier. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top-tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit SkillCapped.com and see the difference. So there you have it, guys, a complete look at the tier list for every single role as we reach the midway mark of 14.17. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.